Welcome. Welcome to our Wednesday yachting luncheon. It's beautiful to be here at the St. Francis Yacht Club looking out the window at our beautiful view. Holy cow, we can always look out these windows at an incredible view, whether there's fog or not fog. It's beautiful out there. I want to right off the bat say what a great stag cruise we just had. It was a terrific. Members show was real fun, and lots of people have called last year's. I think it's officially rated. Last year's was the highest rated stag cruise, and I'm going to wait to see the survey results this year. This one might even beat that. So good on to Tommy Gilmore, who chaired it the last 2 years, and to the great members of the St. Francis Yacht Club for having an incredibly great summer cruise. Just got to say, great fun. And I want to acknowledge Sailing Illustrated, who helps us put these Facebook live streams on. We've now got over 70,000 views since the beginning of the year on the archive of Yachting Luncheon Talks. As you know, we are the only club in the world with 52-week-a-year program. And now that we have these archived, other yacht clubs are beginning to use them and run them for their own luncheons, which we're quite pleased to announce. Let's see a little bit about future speakers. You want to come by at the end of the year. Gary Jobson will be here to talk all about the state of yachting in the world. Jumping ahead because we're all booked up through the end of the year. Bob Heller will be here in November to talk all about the relationship between interest rate changes and the economy, the stock market, and the average Joe. Also, you want to come by in October. We'll have Tony and Langdon, the creators of 30 Knot Gourmet. 30 Knot Gourmet, you wonder, what could that be about? Yes, it's about having great gourmet food on your yacht while you're racing in 30 knots. They've decoded the way to do all of that, so they'll be here. Also in October, Dave McGuire, the creator of Shark Stewards, will be here. Sharks are these reputedly fierce creatures, but in reality they're great predators in the sea, and they're in danger, not from other fish, but us humans. People are chopping off their fins and using for soup and all kinds of other trophies. That's a danger to the entire ecosystem of the ocean, and so we're going to hear what we can do about that. Also, in October, Adam Wright will be here to talk all about cool little two-person and some three-person submarines that have found a new recreational market at high-end resorts and on giant luxury yachts. So he'll be here to talk to us all about that. And Greg Thomas will be here to talk to us all about shipping and managing ships in San Francisco Bay in October. He'll talk all about from the first time we pick up a pilot boat all the way through to berthing in San Francisco Bay and how all of that is tracked logistically. So that'll be very, very interesting. He's super authoritative on that subject. A little bit about our speaker today. Now, today is not just our date today, but if you go back to 1983 on this very date, many of us in this room were sailing in cool boats in San Francisco that had jig people would run the boats for us. I was on a boat called Great Fun a lot then, and as we left to practice, an Australian on the boat said, no, at the very last moment, he didn't get on the boat. I didn't know why. After practicing all day, we came back and we kept thinking, the seventh race was today. I wonder what happened. We pulled into, over Point Richmond, and I asked the Aussie who was standing on the dock, what happened in the America's Cup today? He just kind of smiled at me. And I said, what happened? What happened? There were no cell phones. I ran in, used Clay Bernard's phone to phone this club, and what happened in the America's Cup? And they said, we lost. We lost. And I looked at this guy and said, that's why you stayed on shore. And he just kind of gave me that same even-toned smile. Well, Tommy, our buddy and yacht club historian and America's Cup authority, Tom quickly and sensitively picked this point up, and he brought us this image. Those of you who remember, Halsey Hershoff had said on the Down the Wind Breeze on Liberty, go left, go left. That's where he predicted we'd get stronger breeze. And Liberty, Dennis Conner's Liberty, jibed on the port tack for a while. And they kept looking over at the Australian boat, which continued going straight. Everybody knows jibing in light air, chancy kind of move. And pretty soon, Dennis and Wood and the boys said, we got to jive back to cover them. And when they jived back and met up with the Australian boat, this was the unfortunate look. Australia was ahead. They'd go to the leeward mark, a port rounding, and that was yachting history. So on this day in 1983, America, for the first time in 132 years, lost the America's Cup. Good on you, Tommy, for thinking about that, and holy cow, that was quite a day in yachting history. Let's see, a little bit about our speaker today. It's always intriguing when you look at the beginnings of a kind of a nautical career. In the case today, at 8 years of age, our speaker today, for his first boating memory is being on a red and white fleet boat out on San Francisco Bay with his parents, looking through the rails at the water going by and thinking, what a kind of a cool thing this is. He ended up growing up in Newport Beach, and he was on his canoe all the time, 13 through 17, canoeing around in Newport Harbor. At 15, he was sailing back from Catalina, and as he was sailing back from Catalina in gale force winds, he thought, pardon this term, but shit, I hope I get through this alive. What makes you, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger, kind of proved to be his case. He joined the Navy ROTC at age 20 and started out as a mechanical engineer, but switched paths at UC Irvine to move into English literature. Sailed, a little bit in those days, but at 21, went to work for Hornblower Yachts down in Southern California. Went through a series of roles in Hornblower Yachts as he went from being a mate and a deckhand to being a captain and a skipper. Ultimately became skipper of the California Hornblower up here in San Francisco Bay. And then became, in his part-time, a captain of the Marine Sciences Institute down in Redwood City, where they served schools and had other educational and ecological, environmental educational programs. Then he became the ops manager in 96, and by 99 became the director of operations for Red and White Fleet. He's ascended in that role and other ops roles to be then VP Ops, and now, the beginning this year, Executive Vice President of the Red and White Fleet. We all know the Red and White Fleet's got 5 boats, 100 employees, and they basically help the tourism business in San Francisco Bay in the most thoughtful way. They bring the people out to the water all the time. The fact that they're spearheading such an environmental effort, as Joe's going to talk about today, is completely commendable. And so please join me in welcoming Joe Bergrund, our speaker today. Joe.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all today. It's a great honor. So today, my presentation is going to be a little bit of a sharing some stories, lots of pictures, and my idea is really to share about the Red and White Fleet. It's a real San Francisco treasure, and I just wanted to point out the company's been around since. And I'm going to change this up here. Is it? Okay, good, great. So the company's been around since 1892, when the founder was 17 years old. Many of you in the room would recognize his name, Thomas Crowley. Bought his first vessel. It was a Whitehall rowboat, and he really became a legend here on the water. He began bringing mariners out to vessels and moving supplies around the bay. He reinvested in his company, and he eventually bought more rowboats. Today, the company is a sightseeing company, but it's gone through many different evolutions, and I'll address some of those. Ron had mentioned that we have 5 vessels. They range in size from 350 to 600 passenger vessels. And just right across this window, if you sat here, you would see us go by at least 5,000 times in a year, go out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. And one of the things that we've really focused on in the last 20 years is focusing on historical and educational tours. So our tours are in 16 languages, and we do a large international market. I wanted to mention that the company has been around for a very long time, and I had the good honor of meeting Captain Fred Krause, who worked for Crowley Maritime as captain of one of the tugboats. So he's in the room today. Nice to meet you, Fred. And there's you'll see in my little story here that some pictures of some folks that Fred knows and worked with. Before we move from this slide, there up in the I guess that's the left-hand corner. There's a little ticket booth there, and up high you can see it's probably really hard to read, but it says here Pier 43. So that's Fisherman's Wharf. The company was doing tours long before that, and in the 50s moved down to Fisherman's Wharf where we are today. There's a couple of vessels down there. Those are just still monohulls. The one on the right is a 600-passenger vessel. The one on the left is 450 passenger. There's a little map there that shows our routes here in San Francisco Bay. Move on here. Oops, sorry. Click back. Okay, so this is where I need a little help. There's a sailboat up here, and I'm not sure what it's called. Does anybody in the room know what it's called?
It's a lateen rig.
Thank you. It's a lateen rig. Lateen rig.
Wherry.
Wherry.
Wherry is the shape of the boat, so wherry.
Great.
Good rowing boats can also conserve as sailboats.
So, yeah. So the company started with the rowboat, and sails were used at certain points when it was advantageous. And Thomas Crowley reinvested into gas-powered launches. And in 1906, there's the unfortunate view there of San Francisco. He was instrumental in helping people get out of the city. He also supported a number of the banks, the Bank of Italy, which became the Bank of America. He transported their cash, their coins, out of the city into Berkeley. He also took securities from a number of different banks and anchored up in the middle of the bay. It was kind of a unique history there. He invested in some other companies and began moving scows about the bay with grain and sand and lumber, and eventually got into tugboats. Sorry, I keyed the wrong way there. And really made his first entry into passenger sightseeing in just prior to 1915. And if you look at this image here, you can see the St. Francis there on the marina. This is the Palace of Fine Arts in the World Exposition, or rather the Panama Pacific International Exposition that showed off San Francisco and its return to the world stage. Down, it's not the St. Francis, but it's where we are today. And there's a little ticket up there. It's, you know, at that time it was 25 cents to do a tour, and he was taking people out to some of the battleships that were anchored up here in San Francisco. And he built two of the first passenger sightseeing vessels there, the Crowley 17 and 18. That continued on. Make sure I get it in the right direction here. And if you're a local here, you recognize that as Treasure Island and the 1939 Golden Gate International Exposition. Kind of interesting. There's a iconic tower there on Treasure Island, and down in the lower left corner, that was Thomas Crowley's son, also a Tom Crowley. He's on the shoulders of Bill Fagari, who was a colleague of Fred Krause's. So he's getting towed behind a boat here out by Treasure Island. So just some of the legacy that the company has here in San Francisco goes back, and that little ticket booth grew in the 50s, got a little bit bigger down there, and just to emphasize that we do cruises. There's a lot of cruises there, so there's some early advertisement and authenticating our presence here on the bay. The Harbor Queen up there, that's still in our fleet. When it was built in Stockton in 1954. And it was elongated in 1971. And I just got distracted. One of our boats is going by outside. Sorry about that. So this vessel still operates today. That's not the Harbor Queen going by right now, but I think it's in service today. And she was one of 3 similar vessels that were built at the time. We have 2 of them still in our fleet. In 1997, Crowley Maritime split out the red and white fleet and sold it. They sold it to Thomas Escher, who is the son of Virginia Escher, who is Thomas Crowley Sr.'s daughter. So he's a grandson of the original founder. So the company continues in the family, and it's a really unique place to work. Tom is really a visionary, and when I started working for him in 1999, one of the first things I did was follow his lead to pursue dual fuel on the Harbor Queen to see if we could run compressed natural gas as well as diesel through the engines that we had. We got some money from the Maritime Administration. We did a feasibility study. Yes, it was possible. Possible was different than practical, so it wasn't quite practical. And just in that picture was the Zelephus, which is a boat that we purchased in 2013 to increase the size of our fleet. That's a 600-passenger vessel. It's the one we just saw go by, and it was a block iron ferry. We bought it in Connecticut, renamed it, and refurbished it. Has Tier 3 engines on it. It's pretty efficient, pretty clean, but built in 1981. In response to just growth in our business and being able to run something rather than buying old boats and refurbishing them, we decided that we would build a new boat. And that's where we are today. I'm going to share a little bit about that. So as we approached the idea of building a new boat really actively, probably in 2014, 2015, we were just looking at how has the technology penetrated the marine industry. And it's just interesting that the marine industry, as many of you know here as sailors, sextants are reliable. There's some true and tried ways of getting around on the water, and it's kind of a slow to evolve industry, at least in the commercial side. Maybe not so much in the recreational. And I'm sure the people we were talking about America's Cup, they would contradict me on that one, but it does take time for innovation to come into this industry. But as we were looking, this is a slide that a number of you have seen before, or at least seen the vessel. This is the Ampere. It's a all-electric car ferry in Norway, and it has a capacity of carrying 120 cars. You can see a couple semis on there, and 300 passengers. It does about a 3.5-mile transit across a fjord in Norway. Charges on both sides. I had the good fortune of going to visit that before we started to build our boat, and we just really, it was just inspiring to see what was possible and what we could do. And this other slide is just that kind of exponential hockey stick of innovation, how we have seen technology rapidly change. That's Moore's Law. So when we came to build a boat in the 21st century, we really wanted to build a boat with 21st century technology. And we had to look at that and see what it would look like. Doing business in San Francisco and in California in particular, it's easy, or a lot easier, to be visionary around environmental issues. And we've had great community support. This vessel that we'll be showing you momentarily here was privately funded and purchased. There was no public monies that went into it. But just what the state has been doing, and there's a little graph up here. I don't know if people are familiar with this or not, but think it was 2 weeks ago, Governor Brown announced that the state of California would be 100% renewable by 2045. So beginning in 2002, the state has been setting these benchmarks to increase the renewable power that's supplying our grid in California. And currently we're trying to hit a 33% by 2020, and this summer we were at 32%. So in each case, it's changed 5 times. The goals have changed 5 times. In each case, they've changed to move it up, meaning that our targets have gotten either bigger or closer in time. Yeah, good for the state. And it also, some of the environmental groups in California really recognize that electrifying our transportation is going to be one big step in addressing some of the long-term climate issues. And being able to get renewable energy off the grid is the pathway forward. So this is the vessel and its rendering before it was built. This is what we thought we would build. It's a 128-foot vessel. It's really designed for sightseeing. It has a third deck that has a capacity of 300 people on there. And then it has a full walk-around second deck and some very nice interior spaces as well. And we decided to build a hybrid electric vessel. And part of that is, and I'll try to address this later. Make sure I watch the time here. I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. Is that, to go all electric, you really need some significant charging infrastructure in order to pull in, charge up, and get back underway. So the hybrid allows us to run this vessel in all electric mode. If we run slow, we can do a 2-hour sunset cruise in all electric mode. That's our last cruise of the day. The sunset cruise, come back. We can charge off the grid overnight. But then during the day, the generators will kick on periodically to charge the batteries. It's a little inboard profile here, so you can get a sense. Sorry, I'm turning away. I should be looking at my computer. Sorry for the mic management there. You get a little sense of the vessel here. There's 2 generators, 2 electric motors, 2 reduction gears, and 2 shafts. That's our engine room. And forward of that is a battery compartment, and forward of that are a couple of fuel tanks, which we plan to close off and fill up the battery compartments and close off the fuel tanks when we get the charging infrastructure in place. Here's a little quick picture of some of the equipment on board. It's really a clean and small engine room. Our other vessels, the one that just passed by, it has 2 main engines, 2 generators, and an engine for a bow thruster, so it has 5 engines in it. This one just has 2 that run less frequently. So when it started, it looked like that pile of aluminum in the upper left-hand corner, and in about a month, it was all framed up, and in a couple of months, they built the hull upside down and rolled it over, and that was a pretty spectacular moment. They lifted it up there, the cranes above. The evolution of the build, the superstructure went on, and this summer it was painted, put on a truck trolley, and rolled about 1/4 mile and launched. It's a pretty big boat to put on a trailer and move into the water, but we were able to do that successfully. It cruised down the coast of San Francisco at the end of August. It was a really seamless trip. While it was coming down, it was doing about 8.5 knots, and it was burning 8 gallons an hour. 3 gallons on one side and 5 gallons on the other side. The 5 gallons was because the house load was on that side. So very efficient hull. This is one of the things about building the hybrid vessel is it's built out of aluminum. So right there, you typically buy maybe 30 to 40% weight gain and comparative. I just looked at the lightweight of this boat compared to the Zellifish that went by. It's a third of the weight. And that's just because of the way that the hull was designed and the whole boat overall. On September 13th, we had our maiden voyage. We had about 400 people on board. It coincided with the governor's Global Climate Summit action here in San Francisco. We had some really good press. The governor came on board. He signed 16 pieces of legislature on the bow of the boat here, so it was a great night for us. We had state senators and assemblymen on here as well. And I just threw up a few of the publications there that kept us in the loop. So, you know, how is the marine environment absorbing this technology? We look back on the on-road technology. This is kind of an interesting graph. The blue sections there, those are plug-in hybrid electrics, and that starts at 2012 and moves over to 2018. The red and pink are Tesla, are all electric cars there, and the green ones there as well. So you can see that adaptation on road is really increasing. The number of charging stations. A year ago, I looked it up. There was over 8,000 charging stations in, I believe it was California. So the technology is available. We worked with the Coast Guard. We're the fourth boat to get the approval to have these lithium-ion batteries on board and have our certification of inspection to carry passengers in the United States. So the Coast Guard's more accepting of this, and they're supporting our other efforts as well. And the economics is one of the big questions I expect to get is, you know, how much does it cost? Well, there is a capital premium. There is a payoff, and the payoff is really the differential is in your fuel savings. So when fuel's cheap, it's going to be a long payoff. When fuel goes up, the payoff goes faster. We were betting on the future because we could see that electric rates are much more stable than fossil fuels. So bringing that technology into the marine application, just a couple examples. This is what's happening today. The boat in the lower left corner, the green boat there, that's a ferry vessel operating in Sweden. It's composite, so even lighter than aluminum. You buy another 20% less weight, at least. It also has a very unique hull. It's got almost like a hovercraft inflated bladder on it to reduce the resistance, the water resistance, so it really gets up in planes. And that vessel can carry 70 passengers, do 30 knots, and it is all electric. The one in the center bottom is kind of interesting. Last year, Wärtsilä in Norway did a megawatt of induction charging. So this is quick charging on a large ferry with no connection. Just putting it there. The one in the upper right-hand corner, this is the vision of the future. In 2016, a Norwegian company put almost identical boat on the fjords in Norway. That was a hybrid electric vessel. In 2018, they made a second vessel, looks the same, it's all electric. This is in part because of the way they're able to operate it, because they have the charging infrastructure, and because the increase in technology to get the batteries more energy dense and lighter. Some of you might be familiar with the one in the lower right-hand corner. This is the Energy Observer. It's traveling around the world. It's a French vessel, but it has solar panels. It has a hydrogen electrolyzer, so it can make its own hydrogen and run a fuel cell on board. Uses kites. It uses basically every kind of propulsive technology that doesn't take fossil fuel. And the one in the upper left, that was the first commercial application of a fuel cell boat, which I know Dr. Pratt talked about a few weeks back, and he and I work collaboratively on that effort.
Where was that based? Hamburg, Germany?
Yes. Thank you. Good eye there, Tom. All right. So given that we have a limited amount of time, I'll try not to bore you too much with graphs, but I'll just point out a couple of things. The graft on the top with the green spikies. So this is kind of what a diesel electric generator has to manage. It has to manage up and down all the time. The one on the bottom, you'll see a flat line across the top. That's what the generator sits at if you're under load. So you're traveling 12 knots. It just sits steady. It runs at its most efficient. And that spikiness of going up and down waves or buffeting or whatever's creating that load change is absorbed by the battery. It can respond much faster, and it can take energy back when it's not needed. So you'll see a line kind of going through that. This is the efficiency of the hybrid in a marine application. Well, our generators on board aren't fixed rate, so they're variable speed. So whatever load we put on it, it will go to its most efficient rate and run there. This is just interesting because I spoke earlier about what our vessel does, then Hydra. You can see just the speed to load curve there, and this is not the actual one. This is just a sample one. But if you're traveling at 5 to 6 knots, your power requirement is very low. You have to quadruple the amount of power to double your speed, and then after that, it goes up even faster. So this is where there's right applications for right technology, and we're fortunate in the sightseeing that we have a really good fit for using the hybrid and electric model. Now, this is the one where I thought everybody's eyes would really glaze over. This is what I'm working on now. The boat has arrived, and now we're working on the charging infrastructure. And there's any electrical engineers in here. We have the grid power coming in and landing on a shoreside battery. So when the boat's away, a shoreside battery can charge up. And then when it comes back, batteries have this capacity of discharging really fast at powers much higher than what they store. So it's a good way to get a lot of energy quickly and also flatten out your load on the grid. This will we're setting this up as a microgrid. We're down at Pier 45 where we have a lot of open space for solar panels, and we're looking at the possibility of charging those batteries shoreside also with solar, so offsetting some of our grid needs there. This is an older slide. So it says light rail by Alstom. This is just how quickly this technology is coming into transportation. This is a fuel cell light rail train, and last year they were talking about doing tests. And if you happen to see this in the news, this summer they're running passengers on this all fuel cell light rail in Germany. Last year they converted these two HH ferries, 780-foot ferries, into all electric. They put a lot of batteries on them, and they have very fast charging. They're able to recharge their batteries in 10 minutes. And also Viking Cruises. A lot of the world, sorry, missing the words like UNISEC, is that the right term for the environmentally protected sites? A lot of the fjords, a lot of the places. UNESCO, that's it. Thank you, Tom. Sites have environmental sensitivity, and these are the cruise destinations. So the cruise ships are really paying attention to this. A lot of them, they're starting to build LNG ships, but they know that LNG is just a step towards hydrogen. So Viking Cruises has announced their intent to go to hydrogen. And how are we doing on time? I think we're good. I got maybe a minute here. And there's the Ampere there again, and this is just kind of an interesting story of how one effort can really change the course or accelerate courses. So the Ampere in 2010, the Norwegian government, that this vessel supports the marine highway system, decided that they wanted to build an environmentally friendly vessel. It took them a couple years to contract it, a couple years to get it on the water. Went on the water in March 2015, and within months, the government said, okay, we're going to make all of our ferries zero emission. And they set that goal for 2030, and I suspect with their accelerating intent that they'll be able to beat that. So we ended up here in San Francisco September 6th, and this is the Enhydra, and I invite everybody in the room and everybody that's watching to come see the boat. It's really a beautiful boat. We will use it for sightseeing. The next public cruises are going to be for Fleet Week. It will also be used in private events and special events. And this is just kind of coincidentally, but there's a nice little rowboat out there to kind of hearken to our original start back in 1892, and in 2018 we made it to a nearly all-electric 21st century vessel, and we're very proud of it. And I think anybody that lives in San Francisco or the Bay Area should also take some pride in the possibility that we were able to do it in this environment. So thank you very much for your time.
Leave that slide too, in case we need to go back to the building for that.
See, buddy. So welcome again to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. We're visiting today with Joe Burgard, Executive Vice President of the Red and White Fleet. Joe, congratulations on your movements towards zero-emission maritime vessels. You mentioned an astounding low fuel usage. You said that you were able to get 6 gallons per hour. Did I hear you correct? Is that per engine?
It was
2 engines?
It was a total of 8 gallons per hour. It was 5 on one side and 3 on the other, making 8.5 knots down the coast.
An 8.5 knot. Now, that is, first of all, unbelievable. By contrast, on our recently completed stag cruise, I went up on a 100-foot Sunseeker, and it was generating at 12 knots. We were going about 30 gallons per hour. 30 gallons.
Yeah.
There were 6 of us on the boat, not 600. So that is an astounding number that you've given. So am I right in understanding that the principal savings is in fuel, but is that the case? It's in fuel usage?
Yeah, there's fuel usage. We expect to have a benefit from the just general operating cost too, with lower maintenance. The engines will run quite a bit less. There's fewer of them. There's smaller.
Fewer engines.
There's only 2 engines instead of what would normally be on our vessels, at least 4, or in this case, this vessel also has a bow thruster. So, so there's less maintenance there. It's hard to quantify that yet because we don't have the experience. So anything we would just be sort of guessing at, but we'll be able to do direct comparisons in the future.
And what's the difference in weight? You mentioned the difference in weight between the new Enhydra and your typical 600-person ferry?
Yeah, so I'd have to phrase it a little bit differently. So it's really, it's significant. It's 85 tons to 243 tons, lightweight vessels.
So 1/3 the weight. Is what you're saying.
One third the weight. And this is mostly because the vessel was designed to be highly efficient. It's durable. It's it's not a light, flimsy hull that's going to waste anytime soon, but it's much lighter in the water. It's made out of lighter materials.
What about crew size?
So the crew is the same size as our other vessels.
No increase in crew size at all?
No.
Give us some understanding of how you power the vessel. When it's ashore, you'll be charging it with electricity. Describe the whole process. Let's get a cycle of a voyage. When's it powering? How long will that take? What's its range, et cetera?
Right. So you'd have to think of it as a plug-in hybrid or a plug-in like a Chevy Volt type thing. So it has a certain range in all electric, but then the generator will have to kick on to recharge the battery if you're just an all electric. If you're say like Priuses tend to get better mileage in a city environment because they're sort of up and down, and the hybrid really gets to benefit. If you go out on the highway, you're getting the benefit of the light design, but the engine's going to run kind of constant, just like it would in a regular car. So there's really right applications for the technology. To answer your question about what is the energy transfer, so because we don't have the infrastructure to charge really quickly, we can't recharge in the 15 minutes that the boat is back in between each cruise. So it'll just operate like a normal vessel, but overnight it will be able to, we'll be able to take out 110 kilowatt hours of energy out of the battery, and rather than recharging that from diesel fuel generators, it will come off the grid.
And the source of the power that you're getting from the grid?
So as a port tenant, we are an SFPUC client, which means our electricity is coming from Hetch Hetchy, which is hydroelectric.
So hydroelectric, okay. So is there a metric on the fuel footprint or the sort of fuel consumption footprint of the vessel?
Yes. So the California Air Resources Board has a way of calculating emissions per, usually it's done by brake horsepower hour, and I can calculate that, but this boat operates differently than any of their models propose, so I haven't really done that to give you a direct differential in the emissions benefits.
Now, you mentioned that stop-and-go traffic, a Prius works better. I presume that's because the braking power is converted into generating electricity. Is that what's happening in that case?
Well, you do get the benefit of regeneration, but a lot of it has to do with electric motors have really high low-end torque. So when you're accelerating, a combustion engine is going to burn. That's when it's least efficient and it's lower RPMs. So it's burning fuel much faster than it would otherwise. So if you have the electric motor bring it up to speed, you're getting that benefit, and then the engine kicks on.
So is there any equivalent in maritime use? There's no braking in maritime use. How do you use, is there any equivalent regeneration power from the operation of the vessel?
Yeah, it's possible, but it's in this case, we're not doing it. A few months ago, Charlie Walther was here, and he's been working with the Matthew Turner that has a very similar hybrid system on board. And that's a brigantine that will go out and sail. So they'll use the engine for short periods of time, get out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and maybe transit down the coast. So their shafts will just spin, but that would be kind of a really light trickle charge going back into the battery. So it probably won't cost them anything, but it's not a very efficient way. It's sort of like putting a solar panel on the top of your car. It's really not enough generation to offset your energy consumption.
So now you have 5 ships and 5 boats. And you do how many trips per year?
We do over 5,000 trips.
Will this boat represent 1/5 of the traffic, or will it get more than 20% of your 5,000 trips?
Yeah, well, we actually thought we were building a boat to augment our current service, but what we got was a piece of equipment that's so much nicer than the rest of our equipment that it's a different product altogether. So we're really going to sell it differently. We hope that it sells at least 20% of our overall revenue.
Now, what does Red and White Fleet represent of total sort of local ferry-like traffic in the bay? What share of market are you?
Well, we focus exclusively on the tourism market.
Right.
The commuter transit is, you have the public agency of the Water Emergency Transit Authority, and the Golden Gate ferries. There's a few other private ferries that are operating. If I had to guess, I would say we're maybe around 10%, 10 to 20%. So I would think somewhere in there.
And so what are the economics of the ferry services, from Vallejo and Alameda and so on? Don't they have the same issues that you have in terms of desire for fuel efficiency and overall operational efficiency?
They do, so when you say you have a long distance transit from like Vallejo to San Francisco, that's 25 miles. So you have to be competitive with on-road traffic. So it means you have to travel very quickly. In order to do that, they bring it up to speed and they stay at that speed. So they're kind of at the peak load. Goes back to your 12 knots with 6 people. If you were doing 7 knots, you probably would have been burning 12 gallons instead of 30 gallons. So the commuter traffic requires this different energy profile. So our hybrid system is probably not the best application, but this is why we're looking at fuel cells. There's other types of zero emission.
So what I'm wondering is, what do we have to do to get a larger percentage of bay ferry-like traffic to move toward this more environmental equipment?
Well, the largest operators, the WETA, and the folks there that I know are very environmentally conscious, and they have a strong mandate to figure out how to do it as clean as possible. The one thing that they are doing is they're running Tier 4 engines, which have a remarkably small footprint for criteria emissions. These are smog, pollution, health effect ones. As long as they're burning fossil fuels, they're putting out a lot of greenhouse gases. We also operate with renewable diesel, which means that the diesel is made from in-cycle carbon. This is like waste products, like think of like the same feedstock that goes into biofuel. Renewable diesel is made from the same feedstock, but it's the same chemistry as diesel.
So we're visiting today at the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon with Joe Burgard, Executive Vice President of the Red and White Fleet. And if you have questions in the audience, hold your hand up, and John will bring a microphone, and we'll start out with a question from the ether. Our Facebook stream has sent a question. And Julia, what's the question? Or comment? Alex Kent
has a series of 4 questions for you. The first is, the Port of Oakland is part of the Northern California Power Agency, independent from PG&E. I wonder if they can provide some of the cheaper high voltage chargers.
So we're centered here in San Francisco, so the proximity of the charging would be important. I would be interested. I didn't know that they had their own utility agency, so maybe if I can be put in contact with Alex, I'll look into what's available over there.
Good. What is the capital and operating cost premium of this electric solution versus the traditional diesel?
Yeah, so building a vessel our size, the propulsion system, I'm going to just use rough numbers, so nobody persecute me for this, but it might be it could be somewhere in the 5 to 10% cost of the vessel. So that's the propulsion side of it. And
wait, you're saying the annual fuel cost is 8 or 10% of the total vessel? What do you mean?
No, I'm talking about the capital cost. So if you're going to build a new vessel, and say you're going to spend $10 million, and it depends on what kind of vessel you're building.
What was the total cost of Enhydra?
It was just over $7 million.
$7 million bucks.
Right.
And what's the revenue you expect per year from the Hydra?
That's business confidential. I can't tell.
Sure. Okay. We got to ask these questions just in case.
I'll answer it this way: a lot.
A lot. What's your expected payback, or is that also a business confidential?
Yes, I would say. Yeah.
I figured it was.
Yeah. But I just want to try and clarify that last point. So say a $10 million boat, and your propulsion system is going to cost somewhere close to $1 million. So it's roughly 10% of the overall cost. So the capital cost to go to hybrid, you're looking at maybe, I'll just say another 50%. So say it's $1.5 million. So that's a smaller percent of the overall capital cost of the project. And that is the delta that you're trying to address with your fuel cost savings or operating cost savings over time.
Do you also expect increased traffic, i.e. people wanting to be on this boat more than other boats?
Yeah, definitely. Once people start experiencing it, it's really amazing to be on this boat. It's hard to talk to sailors about how pleasant it is to sail with no engine noise, but it is really a fascinating way to get a lot of people out on the bay and do it very quietly.
And Julia, before questions from the room, you have another one from the ether?
2 short ones. First of all, is ferry service being added to the Port of Redwood City?
So that is on the WETA's list of potential projects. It's further down the list, but there's a number of private firms down there, so people with large campuses like Facebook. And there is some private ferry service in place now, and there's a lot of interest in developing that market.
And the final question is, how about making the passengers ride bicycles to charge?
Well, that's a good idea, yeah. But the one thing, we didn't put any stabilizing equipment on board, so we don't want them falling off their bikes.
Russell Long has a question. Russell.
First, thank you. Is this on? Thank you for a great presentation. It was very, very informative. And Joe, you and I go back a long ways because you recall about 20 years ago, we came out with a report, an environmental group that I ran, showing that ferries were creating 10 times more emissions per passenger than cars. And I got front page news. Senator Don Parada at the time changed some legislation in Sacramento to move the bar down and to reduce emissions as a result of that. And so it's gratifying to see how far things have come. Really commend you guys on the work you've done. And I will ask you how close we've gotten to passenger cars on a per mile basis, but I wanted to add one more thing. I was in Sydney, Australia last month, and I had dinner with Robert Dane, who invented the first electric-powered solar ferry boat in the world, the Sydney Solar Sailor. And we were commiserating over the fact that we had tried to help him get the Alcatraz route to be electrified. He came up here, he had a beautiful model, got shown around all over the city, and we asked Red and White, please build this, and they said no, and we went to Hornblower. Hornblower said, oh, we'll do it, and they put it as part of their proposal. They won the bid for Alcatraz, probably the most lucrative ferry route in the world, from what we heard, and then they didn't build it. And we asked the Park Service, please sue them, make them enforce that contract, make them build that boat, and they wouldn't do it. So what's going to happen with Alcatraz? I don't know when that contract comes up. I assume you guys would go after it if it is up.
Well, it comes up in 2018, and it has already come up. And
I didn't realize.
Yeah, and we talked to Robert, so I'm surprised that Robert didn't tell you that.
He said that he'd been in discussions. He didn't give me any details.
So who got the contract?
It hasn't been awarded yet,
Okay.
and I'll leave it at that for right now. Sorry, it looks like you lost the microphone. I don't know if there was a follow-on question, but you did a good summary. Emissions per passenger. So in sightseeing, it would really depend on how many people are on the vessel.
What's your average load?
It depends on the season too.
300?
I would say closer to 150.
Okay, so on 150, if you modeled 150, what would the consumption per passenger be?
Well, I'm not that quick at math, but we do about a 6 nautical miles, so 8 miles, and we're going to be burning. You could just use the 8 gallons for 8 miles, so gallon per mile for 150 people. So you would have to answer that question whether that's better or worse. I know it's not as good as the electric car I'm driving, but we're working towards making the boat all electric as well.
So, Russell, if you'll run the numbers while we ask more questions.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, Freddie Krause.
Yeah, I would like to know, when we had the earthquake here in San Francisco, all the ferries went into service. I guess it was Blue and Gold and Golden Gate Ferry. Is Red and White set up to some kind of a evacuation of the city in need?
Yes, we are. And actually at that time in 1989, it was Red and White Fleet. That was before Crelly had sold it. So that was back in the time when the company I work for did much of the moving out of the city, and that's kind of where the Oakland Alameda run began. The Red and White Fleet is part of the Coast Guard and the Water Emergency Transit Authority's response equipment. So they know the equipment we have, they know the capacity, and will be called upon should that situation arise.
I don't know if you remember this, but all those ferry terminals were set up in 3 days. Oakland, Alameda, and Richmond, which has never been, could never have been done before because of the bridge.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak badly of anybody, but the current timeline for new ferry terminals to go in is about 7 years, although they are building new terminals down at the ferry building right now as we speak. So they're supposed to be operational by 2019.
So we're running low on time. I want to ask quickly. So thus, what's the maintenance cost comparison? This engine, the Hydra's engine, and traditional ferry the same size. Does this cost less, half the maintenance?
Yeah, so I would guess that. I would say about 50%.
Okay.
I'll know definitively in about a year's time. I'll be able to
Great.
compare some real numbers.
Well, thank you. Lynn,
Yes.
Lynn
I
Monroe.
wanted to ask you if these other countries that are ahead of us, really, because they've been building these longer, is that because of government funding? Excuse my voice, I have a little laryngitis. Government funding, like Germany and Norway.
Yes, yeah, definitely. The capital cost to get these projects started has to really come from public funds, but we're seeing it happen quickly on road too, where I think the subsidies for electric vehicles will be going away soon as the parity gets closer.
Yes, Atomic Reynolds.
I have 3 comments. First of all, I'm short and old. The city of Alameda is a part of a 9-city consortium, including Palo Alto and Santa Clara. They buy their power directly from the Shasta Dam generators, the same power that PG&E buys, and they sell it at 2/3 the price, if you're interested. The city of Alameda Electrical Department would probably be very happy to talk to you, because they still make money on it.
Okay,
Third,
good.
Third thing, the question next, I wondered if you, in your seeking to build a more efficient hull, looked into propeller designs. I know they have far more efficient propeller designs today, and I just wondered if that was on your agenda.
It was. We looked at that. There was. We looked at azimuthing propellers. We looked at controllable pitch propellers, and also tunneled propellers. But the efficiency gain for the capital and additional weight didn't work on this vessel. I think there's better applications for that, depending on the speed and application of the boat.
Are there any other cost reduction factors? Do you get better, cheaper insurance? Do you benefit any other way, cost factors with this new power plant?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because our insurance broker is here, and I want to talk to him about that. So, Doug.
Doug Holm, great insurance broker. He's already bid, we can see.
No, truly. We got
yeah.
because the aluminum hull and the efficiency of the hull, and then also.
Hold on, give him the mic.
Bring a mic over. This is real important stuff. So, a formed comment by Doug Holm. Pass the mic over, would you please?
Can you get Doug?
Yeah, pick up Doug. Thank you, Doug. Doug Holm, insurance broker.
Thank you.
Lockhart.
Yeah, there is a component to the way the hulls are built, that they're aluminum, more modern, and also the fuel systems. So there is these vessels are less expensive to insure than the current fleet.
Thank you. So that's great. That's another advantage you're talking about. Our last question, Paul Kamen, naval architect. We want to listen to Paul's question.
Just to pick a small nit, you said that power goes up by, power quadruples when you double speed. Actually, drag quadruples when you double speed. We all know that power is force times speed, so power actually goes up by the cube. If you double speed, the power has to go up by a factor of 8.
Thank you. And that does.
So there's a huge benefit. Now, working some back of the envelope numbers, from 8 gallons per hour at 8.5 knots, assuming 300 passengers, you're at only 439 BTUs per passenger mile, which is the metric I use to compare carbon footprint. Scale it up to 25 knots, and you're somewhere around 4,000 BTUs per passenger mile, which is about 3 times what the what the optimized catamaran ferries are doing at that speed. So the break-even point for the power grid generation has to be about 2/3 renewable in order for this life cycle, carbon cycle, to come out favorable. But we're on the right track.
But Paul, aren't you also, you're talking about a different hull design. You're saying a catamaran hull design.
Oh, yeah. No,
And you're saying you hope that that might be more efficient to get through the water, independent of the power.
Yeah, the power speed relationship assumes that the hull is optimized for whatever speed we're looking at.
Right, and I think that when you just upsized it, so this boat isn't built to travel 25 knots. Its top speed is 13 knots.
It's a tourist boat.
It's a tourist boat, and so this is why the application of the technology works in a variable speed, variable load, slow monohull.
Yeah, still we're in the thousands of BTUs per passenger mile, whereas BART is at 61 BTUs per passenger mile. And there's a wonderful ferry exhibit down at the San Diego Maritime Museum. The old Berkeley, built in 1890-something, carried 1,700 passengers at 12 knots, and they were down at 400 BTUs per passenger mile. So the way to make a ship efficient is to A, make it slow, and B, make it big.
Right, right. So if we can get 1,700 passengers each time we go out underneath the bridge, I'm all for it.
Great answer. This has been an enjoyable discussion. Joe, we've been visiting today at the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon from the St. Francis Yacht Club with Joe Burgard, Executive Vice President of the Red and White Fleet, and a very informed audience. Thank you very much for joining us, Joe. Great job.
Thank you, Ron.
And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Good going, mate. What did